This represents a turning point for the people of this country. We are determined to take our country back. We're going to fulfill the promises of Donald Trump. That's what we believed in. That's why we voted for Donald Trump, because he said he's going to take our country back, and that's what we got to do.
I guess, Laura, there's some candor, at least from one place yesterday, David Duke. I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that?
People ask if this is a watershed moment, and I feel like that implies some kind of change. It implies some kind of pivot. But this has been Donald Trump all along. These have been the people that have been supporting him all along. I mean, the KKK was circulating pro-Trump flyers during his election, and he didn't denounce them. I remember Jake Tapper had an interview with Donald Trump in February where he explicitly asked, do you denounce these white supremacists, and David Duke, and Donald Trump was kind of like, I don't know, I'd have to research those groups. And then a couple days later, he said his earpiece wasn't working. I mean, he has never ever been able to denounce these people because they make up the core of his base, of the alt-right. So what do we expect him to do now?
Well, if people are watching at home, I mean, and they're watching the news and they're seeing clips of David Duke, I mean, people are watching this, they're horrified. What year is it that we're playing clips of the Grand Wizard? I mean, what year is it? I mean, this is an opportunity for lawmakers on both sides of the aisle to denounce this, to unify the country. This is a president who apparently is giving a press conference tomorrow. This is a president who said frequently on the campaign trail, which I covered since basically the beginning, that he was going to unify this country. This is his first big racial issue test. This is the time, this is the moment for him to rise to the occasion, and the statements he's put out have not met that moment. It's not opinion. This is facts coming from Republicans up on the Hill at the very senior echelon levels.
Kevin, I'm just going to quickly give you the last word. In a normal White House, in a normal time, members of the alt-right, or the folks at the alt-right look to, Gorka, Miller, Bannon, would be out of there at this point after an event like this. What are the odds that they stay on, or that the president asks them to pack up and leave?
Well, I think right now what the country wants to hear is a strong condemnation coming from President Trump. And you know, if you go to states like Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, which President Trump won, I mean, those voters are looking for a strong condemnation on this. Independent voters want a strong condemnation on this. And the Republicans, again, that are going to be in charge of accomplishing his legislative priorities are looking at this and simply saying, what year is it? Put out a strong condemnation on this bigotry and intolerance.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Kevin Cirilli, Laura Bassett, Gabe Sherman, good to see you all. Thank you so much for joining on this Sunday. Appreciate it, guys. All right, new developments in the Russia investigation. The latest, former administration officials now attracting the attention of the special counsel. We'll have that right after this. Turning up the heat on the White House, new information now in the ongoing Russia probe. According to the New York Times, special counsel Robert Mueller wants to talk with current and former administration officials. Coming under the microscope this time, Reince Priebus, the former chief of staff, who was replaced after just 6 months on the job. Joining me now is Ilona Minkowski. She is a political writer for the Daily Banter, a former host of HuffPost Live, and a former colleague, in full disclosure, of mine. So you heard what I just mentioned. Reince Priebus is coming under the microscope. Mueller wants to interview current and former administration officials. Are we getting closer to definitive proof that there was collusion with Russia, or maybe obstruction of justice at least?
I mean, that's a question that only obviously the investigators can answer, but I think that what it shows us is that Robert Mueller is somebody who is going to leave no stone unturned, and he is doing a very thorough job in this investigation. And it also shows that at the end of the day, now that the investigation is in place, it might not even necessarily be something about questions of collusion or election interference that might get the Trump administration or members of the Trump administration or the former Trump campaign, right? Everything now is fair game as part of that investigation. It could be financial disclosures or some type of financial wrongdoing, or it could be something like the obstruction of justice and, of course, the firing of James Comey.
So how does this all play out into the ongoing situation in North Korea? The president, Nikki Haley, his ambassador to the United Nations, was able to get Russia to come on board along with China to vote for these sanctions 15-0, a real big diplomatic accomplishment. With the investigations going on concurrently, is that going to play into our relationship with Russia when it comes to North Korea, do you think?
I don't think having bad relations helps in a situation like this, right? I mean, that was a significant step to actually have Russia and China vote along with the United States on a Security Council resolution. And so moving forward, this is a place where I think that Russia could actually play a big role. Already, as you talked about earlier in the show, Russia and China are trying to propose some type of other negotiation or some type of other process where maybe the United States and South Korea won't do military exercises. Right. They'll put some pressure on North Korea. But either way, you know, I think it's terrifying for a lot of people that you have two men who are essentially having an ego contest with something that is of such a drastic measure where there's a military conflict or possible nuclear weapons use at stake. So I think we should hope for diplomacy.
Before I let you go, just sitting here yesterday watching what unfolded in Charlottesville and watching the president's response, his lack of an ability to address really the issue at hand, terrorism and the issue of racism. It reminds me of how he deals with the Russia probe. He doesn't want to talk about Russia's meddling in the election. He never really wants to go after Vladimir Putin in any way. Is this a deliberate strategy by this president to just beat around the bush when it comes to issues that he thinks are going to upset maybe his base?
His base or maybe affect him himself, right? I mean, the president has no problem criticizing anyone and everyone. The Pope, he called the Pope disgraceful at one point. But when it comes to issues where I think that Americans really look to the president and to the White House for leadership and to take a strong position, you know, whether anybody wants to interfere in U.S. elections, the president of the United States should say that that is something that is unacceptable. On the issue of racism, anti-Semitism, any kind of prejudice and white supremacist views, I think that this is really unfortunate, and it's a huge missed opportunity and a bad reflection on the White House that the president won't just fully come out and say this is something that there is no room for and that we do not support.
All right, Alona Minkowski, good to see you in L.A. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
All right, stick around. At the center of the white nationalist rally was the city of Charlottesville's decision to remove Confederate statues. After this, how another state is responding to yesterday's tragic events with action.
I mean, these influences around the country, these anti-Semites, racists, Aryans, Nazis, KKK, they were always in the shadows. It's now on the president and on all of us to say enough is enough. This movement has run its course.
Joining us now are Kevin Cirilli, chief Washington correspondent in Bloomberg News, Laura Bassett, senior political reporter for HuffPost, and Gabe Sherman, an MSNBC contributor and Vanity Fair special correspondent. Good to see all of you guys. Kevin, I'm going to start with you. The White House statement this morning is looking to deflect some of that criticism the president got by his choice of words yesterday. Come on, why did it not come directly from the president himself?
You know, I just spoke with a senior aide to a prominent member of Congress in the Republican Party who said that, quite frankly, Republicans across the board feel that this president missed the moment, so to speak, in terms of not putting out a forceful condemnation of white supremacy and this neo-Nazi incident. Now, I can also tell you that Senator Ted Cruz, a Republican from Texas, has also called upon the Department of Justice to open up an investigation into this horrific incident that emerged over the weekend, and the Department of Justice has now opened that investigation. Look, when you take a step back and you look at the Republicans who have come out condemning not only this awful racist incident, but also the White House's response to this. It's people like Senator Marco Rubio, Senator Orrin Hatch, as well as a host of other Republicans who are now calling on this president to label this what it is: white supremacy, neo-Nazism. This is something that has to be condemned at the harshest levels possible.
It's not just people outside the administration in the Republican Party. Laura, I want to play for you quickly the president's Homeland Security advisor, Tom Boster, today, what he said. Take a look at this.
The president not only condemned the violence and stood up at a time and a moment when calm was necessary and didn't dignify the names of these groups and people. What they found when they showed up were groups from outside that showed up on both sides looking for trouble, dressed in riot gear, prepared for violence.
So he says he didn't want to dignify their names, yet H.R. McMaster comes out this morning when he's talking to Chuck on Meet the Press and called it terrorism. What are your thoughts?
I just think it's absolutely stunning that Donald Trump and his administration are implying some kind of moral equivalency here between neo-Nazis and the people who went out to protest against them. To say this is a problem of all groups, we condemn all kinds of extremism, is to say everybody out there protesting has a problem. It's like saying to the Nazis and the Jews, you know, everybody needs to stop fighting, everybody calm down. No, there's obviously one main problem here, one main insidious group here, and it's the white supremacists. And why is that so hard to say?
Yeah, it's honestly, I just think so many people are so fortified on the same side today. It's just an extraordinary thing that we're even having this conversation. And Gabe, I know that you also spoke with White House officials about the president's statement yesterday. What are they saying to you?
Yeah, really. I mean, the view inside some corners of the White House is, you know, what the point we're talking about, that this was the result of both sides, that this was the work of violent leftists was the word that my source used to describe, you know, what contributed to this crisis. And this is really indicative of a White House that used parts of this political coalition to get elected. I mean, Donald Trump ran on a platform that appealed to the white nationalists, and I think there's a political calculus here of their refusal to call them out.
Yeah, let's be really explicit here. We have Stephen Miller in the White House, who defended the idea of limiting immigration based on the language that you speak, just said over the course of the past week or 2 weeks, I don't even know at this point. Seb Gorka, who reportedly has ties to anti-Semitic groups, he said that the level of white supremacist violence was not enough to actually talk about just a couple days ago in the national media. And then you have Steve Bannon, who was the head honcho at Breitbart that pushed a lot of this stuff. Gabe, at the end of the day, is it the influence of these three people, and will this type of language from the president ever stop while they're still in the White House?
You know, clearly this is reflective of the nationalist wing of the White House that was spearheaded by Steve Bannon, Stephen Miller, Julia Hahn, and others. I think the larger question that Donald Trump should be asking, beyond sort of the moral abdication of calling this out, is that the political risk, the downside to this, because the Republican Party, which so far has stood by him throughout all of the scandal and crises, you know, we're seeing them break forcefully with Trump on this issue. And Donald Trump is not delivering really any legislative agenda for the Republican Party. At some point, they are going to say that there is more downside to standing with the president than breaking from him. And this is just giving Republicans another reason to put daylight between them and the White House.
I want to quickly play a piece of sound. David Duke, the former Grand Wizard of the Klan, was there yesterday. Of course, Donald Trump refused to disavow David Duke for a very long time during the campaign until he begrudgingly did so. He was talking about his allegiance to the president. Watch this, guys.
And hatred on all sides. That includes white supremacists and neo-Nazis. And I think it's clear, I know it's clear in his mind, and it ought to be clear to all Americans. We cannot tolerate, obviously, that bigotry, that hatred that is rooted in ignorance of what America stands for, what America is.
So again, nothing new from the president. H.R. McMaster also did say in questioning from Chuck Todd that he does view this as an act of domestic terror, and he acknowledged there's a legal definition for this, but his assessment of what took place, it should be viewed in that way. We've not heard that from the president. And so tomorrow, the president, who's been here for more than a week, will go back to Washington briefly for this event, totally unrelated, about China and trade issues. And if there's an opportunity to put questions to him, certainly reporters are eager to do that. We've not been advised that he's intending to take questions or make any other statement. Then the president would go to New York City, where he has not been to his Trump Tower home since he took office, and then we'll spend the remainder of the week here in Bedminster, where the ongoing renovations at the White House are yet to be completed. I'm in Bridgewater, New Jersey. The president's at his Bedminster home. So we have days and days to go, and the president at any time could alert us if he wants to say something more on camera or use his Twitter feed, and so far he has not. Jacob?
Yeah, Kelly, as you can well attest, for a president of the United States who was particularly chatty this week with members of the news media, he is indeed conspicuously silent. Thank you.
I like to be in that.
We can never thank you enough.
Learn more at lastworddesks.msnbc.com and watch The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell weeknights on MSNBC.
What happened in Virginia yesterday shocked the nation, but for those who have been closely following the rise of the white supremacist movement in the United States, Charlottesville came as no surprise at all. Today, the Southern Poverty Law Center counts over 900 active hate groups in America, with hundreds of neo-Nazi, white supremacist, and KKK groups among them. But that number appears to have grown as disaffected white nationalists, perhaps emboldened by the victory of President Trump in November, form new groups and gather at rallies and marches like the one that we saw yesterday in Virginia. Joining me are Kelly Baker, author of the book gospel according to the Klan, the KKK's appeal to Protestant America. And Daily Beast contributing writer Anousheh Hossain, who attended the University of Virginia. Anousheh, I want to ask you the first question. You went to UVA. You were there on the ground. Is what we saw yesterday representative of what normally goes on there?
Not at all. Not at all. In fact, I can't tell you, as a very, very proud UVA alum and as an international student who went to the University of Virginia, really the best of America is what I found in Charlottesville. And the best of America is what I got from this city and from this university. And I can't tell you what a shock it is to see this small, sleepy, beautiful college town, Thomas Jefferson's academical village, just explode with this kind of white supremacist hate and violence. It's unbelievable and unreal to see.
Kelly Baker, I want to ask you, Friday night in Charlottesville, we saw these young white men that we're hearing described carrying torches, a throwback to the days when the KKK, had a stronghold on the South. Did this, what's effectively a modern-day white supremacist movement grow out of the KKK? Did the KKK, ever really die out there?
I mean, this is part of the problem, right? That there were KKK groups that were in Charlottesville, that this is a group that continues no matter what we seem to do. They seem to pop back up, and we can't quite get rid of them as a nation. So I would make an argument that this is an extension of a group like this, but it's more a larger extension of the way in which white nationalism has become increasingly more popular in the run-up to the presidential election in November, but also after, that we see people are more willing to talk about their white nationalism, to be out there, to go to marches, to light torches, to fight with counter-protesters, so that this is very much kind of a moment that we're in that has a history and has a place in our nation. It is actually pretty representative of the way white supremacist movements ebb and flow in American history.
In July, Anousheh, the Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security took back some funding that had been promised by the previous administration to groups working to counter violent extremism. There was a group called Life After Hate. It helps neo-Nazis leave the white supremacist movement. It was notified that its $400,000 grant had just been taken away, rescinded. Do you get the sense that the federal government has turned a blind eye to white nationalism in America under Donald Trump?
I completely get that sense, and it's not just the federal government. Sorry, Kelly. It's not just the federal government. They're taking their cues from the highest office in this country. They're taking their cues from our president. It is not a coincidence what we're seeing on the ground in America and what we're seeing in the 7 months since Donald Trump has come into power. I mean, the Southern Poverty Law Center has said that the candidate cites Donald Trump's candidacy and his presidency for leading and a serious increase of hate groups and hate crimes across the country. And I just want to give our viewers here just some perspective. Imagine if what we're seeing on the streets of Charlottesville today, if these were Muslim protesters, if these were black protesters. I mean, the military would have been called out. Why is it so difficult for Donald Trump to utter the words white supremacists, to utter the words white supremacist terror? That is what we are seeing. I mean, this is a president who has no problem calling out his enemies by name. He has no problem citing Islamic terrorism, but he cannot utter these words. These are neo-Nazis. These are not regular protesters. We have to understand that these are Klansmen without their hoods, and they feel like they can come out and show their faces because they know that the president of this country has their back. And the fact that he has not uttered a single word, I mean, that statement that he gave out yesterday, that generic statement, it can be applied to any violent uprising in any part of the world. Why can he not say, we condemn these neo-Nazi, fascist, white supremacist acts? 3 Americans lost their lives yesterday. What is the president waiting for, and where is the outrage?
Not only, has he not KKK, neo-Nazis, fat, saying the words radical Islamic terrorism. Kelly, I want to bring this back to you because we've seen a lot of this playing out, not just in real life, but basically the build-up to all of this is playing out online. And while the FBI and nonprofits like the Southern Poverty Law Center have been tracking the more organized white supremacist groups, I should say, for a long time, a lot of this racist narrative is building in chat rooms online. Today, the Daily Stormer, a white supremacist supremacist news site, said this. There's an entire thread devoted to mocking the death of Heather Heyer, the young woman killed by Fields when he drove his car into the crowd. Are we paying enough attention to what is actually going on?
This is websites on the internet. I mean, clearly this is something that is occurring, and there's an ease to it, right? It's super easy to tweet some white supremacist slogan. It's super easy to pile on to someone who is counter-protesting white supremacy, to attack known anti-racists, to target the so-called social justice warriors. That this very clearly happens online, and people did not their embodied selves in this and felt that they could be anonymous or they could tweet or that it somehow didn't come back to them. And now we're seeing where the rubber hits the road, that these young white men that we see protesting in Charlottesville are clearly also online and participating in these ways too, and that those are connected. And the more emboldened they feel online, I feel like the more emboldened they are in real life. And that's a problem that we're now facing, that it is okay for people to light torches and march in Virginia feels like a throwback to the time period that I primarily study, which is the 1920s Klan. I kind of wish we weren't there.
But how ironic is it as well?
Go ahead,
how ironic is it that we talk about disenfranchised, Muslim or Arab men that are radicalized online, and then we're seeing this kind of violence? I mean, it's exactly
stories worth telling.
News doesn't just break.
The head of the FBI fired.
We really want all the facts.
It splinters in different directions.
Fiery new rhetoric from North Korea
Takes unexpected twists and turns.
Do you think the president may have obstructed justice?
And our trusted NBC News journalists will guide you through every one.
The world is united in horror after the bombing in Manchester.
So wherever the story goes,
the White House is considering a major shift in strategy.
You'll be right there with it. Watch your favorite MSNBC shows wherever you are. Catch the latest full episodes and watch live. Download the MSNBC app today. The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, only on MSNBC.
Tensions remain very high over the nuclear brinksmanship between the United States and North Korea. CIA Director Mike Pompeo this morning saying that he anticipates North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will perform more missile tests in the future.
I'm quite confident that he will continue to try to develop his missile program, so it wouldn't surprise me if there was another missile test.
But National Security Advisor H.R. McMaster told NBC's Chuck Todd on Meet the Press today that the threat of war does not appear to be imminent, despite the president's recent threats himself.
The president doesn't draw red lines. What he does is he asks us to make sure that we have viable options for him. Mm-hmm. Options that combine diplomatic, economic, and military capabilities.
Staff General Joseph Dunford has arrived in the Korean Peninsula today. He's expected to meet with South Korean President Moon Jae-in tomorrow before traveling to China and Japan later in the week. NBC's Bill Neely is in Seoul, South Korea, with the latest on that visit. Bill?
Yes, good afternoon, Jacob. The U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford, has arrived here in Seoul, and he will meet tomorrow, first of all, with the South Korean Defense Minister, and then with the South Korean President and virtually his national security cabinet. Are the South Koreans happy about what's happened over the last week? Absolutely not, and they will transmit that to General Dunford. They're not happy that the United States President is issuing rhetoric they've never heard before from Washington or indeed from New Jersey. They are worried that from fire and fury to locked and loaded, they are being put in a position where their lives literally are at risk. There are 20 million people in the metropolitan area of Seoul. They would be the first casualties of any conflict between the U.S. and North Korea. They are deeply worried. Also, they're slightly concerned because H.R. McMaster, the National Security Advisor, in speaking to the South Korean National Security Advisor just a few days ago, said that South Korea would be consulted on every step about what the U.S. was going to do. They don't feel that when Donald Trump steps onto the steps of his golf club in New Jersey, that they are being consulted in any way. Now, you can say to the South Koreans that actually the State Department may feel the same way, but that is no consolation to them. They don't feel consulted. they feel that they are being ignored. And that's very important for an ally that is in the firing line, an ally that has been a US partner for so many decades. Joseph Dunford will go from here to Beijing, and he will meet his counterparts there. And of course, the background to that is that telephone conversation